Sports Professor Rick Horrow, live from the Bonaventure Hotel in LA, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It's a big deal here, but it's a trilogy with the NBA, Olympics, Super Bowl, back-to-back-to-back NBC. We're focusing on the NBA for a tremendous entrepreneur. Played basketball for the UCLA Bruins, earning All-American honors as a freshman and a sophomore before turning pro. Baron Davis. 13-year NBA career. Hornets, Warriors, Clippers, Cavaliers, New York Knicks, and the two-time NBA All-Star, by the way. But he was also the NBA steals leader, which you don't see every day. And after he retired, founder of sports and lifestyle culture, the Black Santa Company, big business inside the game, BIG, mentorship, production. The guy's done it all and has become a friend in all walks of life. Very important to talk about where the NBA was, where it's going, NIL, how you protect athletes, what the story is for high tech in the venture capital world of raising money, and maybe most importantly, he stands for how to get ready for the big time while you're playing, but maybe have your eyes set on a new career beyond just looking at Shaq and Michael Jordan and saying Tom Brady and saying, boy, these are great. Baron Davis can do it himself. And now that we're in the middle of NBA All-Star time, nobody better to focus on than Baron Davis. Here he is.
How are you? Good to see you, boss. What's happening,
Yeah,
Rick?
everything is really damn good. Now I'm telling you, I'll see you at the NBA All-Star, Super Bowl, all of that. We're coming out to you along with the Patriots, along with the Seahawks. Everybody talking football, but basketball teams going at a record pace as well. So let's get to that. Um, 46 years ago, I'm sure you don't remember the day, but it's April 13, and the world gets an entrepreneur they'd never had before. Early in your life, did you ever think that you were going to end up not only being in the NBA, but being one of the best investors, entrepreneurs of the modern era, let's say?
My hope and dream was always to make it to the NBA. I think once I got there, it was kind of like, I would say it was a trying journey, right? Being a kid from South Central who went to a privileged private school and, just try to navigate two worlds. And I think when I got to the NBA, I learned that we have enough resources to actually take care of our community. But at the same time, it was, man, there's a whole world of like interesting people that work in and around our sport, right? That are like highly intelligent. And so for me, I think the privileged side of, having Hollywood and those connections in your background, you start to look out and venture and say, hey, I'm a creative. I want to do creative things. And so it was really about those first 3 years listening and learning, taking an internship, seeing who I wanted to be when I grew up, right? And then that first opportunity when I got a chance to become my own agent, I started to look for deals or companies who could be not only the teacher and the mentor, right, but the opportunity that I could help take advantage of and help them take advantage of me and my celebrity at the time.
Was part of your decision to go from Crossroads to UCLA? You wanted to stay home. You liked the legacy. You liked the
Mhm.
tradition. You liked the history. But was also you were near Hollywood, and you can kind of keep one eye open to stuff that you really may want to do down the road.
Yeah, it was always like I always thought that I would be a filmmaker and I enjoyed, the stories and, just the the characters that were in the locker room. I think going to
Mm.
UCLA was really about, you know, um, growing as a professional, growing the network, establishing, a presence in LA, and meeting all the right people. And so for me, it was also about living under that legacy, right? Who Kareem Abdul-Jabbar
Yeah.
was at school and who he is, what Bill Walton stood for, what Coach Wooden stood for, Ed O'Bannon. And so, you're around these people. And I think the goal is to like adopt their greatness and, what you want to embody. And so I think it was really about being an athlete with a voice, but also being somebody that was directly from the inner city of Los Angeles that got an opportunity to go to UCLA.
Yeah, I think I already kind of know already the answer to this question, but the takeaway from UCLA, I assume, is not just the X's and O's, and how to steal a basketball and how to make a three-point shot, but also the Abdul-Jabbars, the Woodens, the Bill Waltons. Ed O'Bannon is a great example because of what he's done
Incredible.
from a legal perspective in the
Yep.
business too. So, the takeaway sound like it transcended X's and O's.
Yeah, it really did. Like when you start thinking about, that next level of community, right? The people at UCLA did a great job of helping raise me, right? Nurture me. And then even now, have a place where I can go back to and network and, learn from even, more incredible people that, are that have already taken the journey that I'm taking now.
Yeah, so you're an All-American and you're an All-American freshman sophomore year, and history tradition great, but you turned pro. What went into your mind about turning pro when you did?
My goal was to get to the NBA. I think,
Yeah,
I wanted to make it to college. I think UCLA was, a smart decision for my brand. But, the ultimate goal was to get to the NBA. I got hurt in college. I wanted to come back another year, but I just think that, because of my draft stock, that I was able to, I mean, the decision was kind of made for itself, right?
yeah,
Um, if you're a top 10 pick, you got to go. So Stephon Marbury,
yeah,
uh, people like that were calling like, "Hey man, um, hey buddy, you got to come out, right? Like it's your time." So, that kind of really weighed into my decision. Was I had put in the work, and I knew that I would be a top 10 pick, and I felt confident about really taking that next step in my basketball journey. I wanted to play against the greats, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
want to win a national championship, but at the same time, you see some of the greatest players in the game, they're starting to get a little old. And it's like, man, if I could ever play against a John Stockton,
yeah.
right, that would complete the dream of my childhood.
Well, so it's 1999, and you're thwarted because you thought you would play in the NBA, but you were drafted by the Hornets. And that, oh, wait, they are an NBA team. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That's not fair. But it's 1999, and you're drafted third, and the Hornets are there. They're up and coming. They've had somewhat of a history. How do you feel? I assume if you're a top 10 pick, you're going to be drafted by somebody that needs a lot of work, and you're ready to work with them to get better.
Well, the funny thing was the Hornets had just missed the playoffs the year
Yeah,
before.
right.
And so, I was walking into a veteran squad that really only needed a couple pieces and like just small contributors with talent. And I think that, when I went to Charlotte, it was, they had the team, they had the vets, right? They had the leadership. And then it was, the opportunity for me that I didn't really get was the opportunity was to come in and start. And so being a rookie, you just kind of sit there and you play your minutes, you learn. But then I think that's what helped me. I got into my first playoff series as a rookie against Philadelphia, playing against the great Allen Iverson. And so,
Yeah.
what kind of better lesson, right? And what kind of better introduction to like the playoffs than playing against Allen Iverson? I'm coming off the bench, but then that's where I think the coaches really saw that I was built for this league. And, even though I never got a chance to start and prove that during the season, the playoffs is where you earn your name and your stripes.
Yeah, but not but. And you played 13 seasons in the Hornets,
Mm-hmm.
Clippers, the Warriors, the Cavaliers, the Knicks, and on and on and on. You have the ability, being one of the smart guys in the room, to adapt to all of these different circumstances. Have players generally changed over the years, and most specifically 13 years from start to finish? Did you notice a change then?
Huge change. On the way out, you started to see guys that were really starting to set up, their family office. They were, partnering with the people that I was seeking out earlier in my career. So there were, the head of, the executive director at, let's say, a large magazine at the time
Yeah.
would go and partner with an athlete and start a media company, or someone would leave an agency and start their agency and partner with a company. I mean, partner with an athlete. And so you start seeing more of this ecosystem starting to align, investors starting to believe that sports is this young ecosystem that's growing, right? And, I kind of stand in the middle and listen and hear and see. And so I think, the opportunistic side for me was um, I get to look at what the young guys are doing and know that I was young, listen to them, right? And I always say I like to be lucky instead of being the smartest person, right? And
Yeah.
so, for me, it's put yourself around people who are awesome, who know awesome people and incredible people. And that's where a great deal flow comes in. And so I'm able to stand, sort of in the middle of culture and tech and music and entertainment, and really just kind of see what the trends, the landscape, and who are the people that are really looking to align with each other, right? And, hopefully become, that talent finder, that matchmaker, that connector that allows people to experience success. And so that kind of started my mission as an entrepreneur, knowing where I wanted to go life after basketball, and, being that business connect, being that, creative collaborator, and being the host with the most was kind of, my aim of, now I know who I want to be when I grow up.
Well, and we'll get to that as that's the core of the interview in just a second. But if I am a student of the game and I look at stats that say, for example, 2.28 steals per game in the NBA playoff, a record, and the steals leader in 2004, 2007, what I see is a guy committed to defense, a guy committed to detail, the guy that's one step ahead of the guy on the other side of the ball, and all good things that translate well into business. Am I overreading it?
No, you're right. You have to think defense first, right? You have to be able to study your opponent. I think you have to be able to. I mean, defense is effort and hard work and a mentality, right? And so it doesn't take a lot for someone to become a good defender, right? But it's a commitment. And I think, when you relate that to being an entrepreneur, an investor, it's like you got to be totally committed. And so, like, the glitz and the glamour of being able to invest means that you have to really do a good job of having a due diligence structure, the right people around you, the right advice, and you have to be super thorough with, like, knowing who your opponent is or knowing who that entrepreneur is. And so I think that's kind of like helped me a lot, right? By knowing that it's always a defensive mentality first,
Yeah.
because you build with your defense. And, if your defense is good enough, you get easy buckets or easy opportunities, right?
Yeah. So it's 14 years ago or so, and you're leaving the Knicks. I think that was the last team you were at with the NBA, and you had media and business ventures thought about, if not only lined up. Was there a clear strategy of how you got into this diverse set of investments, entrepreneurship, and production? Because they're all overlapping, but they're all materially different as far as how you get in. What was your strategy for transition?
Well, my transition strategy was listen and learn. And if there was an industry that I was curious about, I would go and, like, basically put myself through, what I would consider business school, right? And so I would go to the conferences, I go to the summits, the festivals, and, I get to know the right people and really start building community. Being a part of the community allow me to build community, which allows me to create my own little collective of masterminds, right? And, you get a broader view of what that world and what that scope looks like. And so I would say, for me, it's really about being an architect, right? And looking at, where these industries crossing over, whether they cross pollinate, whether they collide, where is there friction, are they on the same parallel street, right? But and going in two different directions, right? And so, you know, a lot of those things for me is just how do you create an architecture that allows people to know that, hey, you do the same thing, you're just in a different industry.
Yeah,
Hey,
well,
this,
sorry.
this executive, right, at, a major network is no different than the president of a WNBA franchise.
Yeah.
It's the same responsibilities. It's just different codes. And so, really just taking that listening and learning experience, jumping in different industries, allowing myself to learn from masterminds, making an investment. And so looking at that investment as like a degree, right? And so will this degree and consumer products, pay off? But I did reward myself by going through the process and saying, hey, I'm not an expert, but like if I'm betting on myself and my, where I think, my strategy aligns, then I'm going to play and bet on these three companies.
Well,
And
I'll
so I
tell you,
think,
yeah, I was just going to say that it sounds like a very unusual dose of humility for a professional athlete, which suits you very well getting into a business that are compatible businesses, but you got to know where the compatibility is and where it's
mhm.
not. Tell us about business inside the game.
Well, business inside the game is, kind of, I say, my lifelong work. And, it was really studying a lot of different apps and social apps and networking apps and platforms from LinkedIn to Crunchbase to, you know, um, different dating apps, right? Matchmaking apps. And it was really like, how do we turn this into a way where business leaders in different categories, but also in the same categories, can have the right opportunity to align? And so I started really looking at, I've spent all this time networking and going to conferences. How do I capture all of these great people or cards or entrepreneurs? And, like, what is my Russian roulette ranking system of, response time or callback or follow up? And
Hmm.
so,
Yeah.
I start rabbit holing into technology and looking at, well, is there a place or is there a club where I can join to learn about consumer products, right? Or learn about sports, right? Or learn about the business of entertainment and learn from masterminds. And so that's what Business Inside the Game is. It's really a concierge platform and membership platform for multi-hyphenate people, right? If I want to learn and grow, I want to be activated and see the people in that space doing it. And so Big gives us the opportunity to network, to meet up at, various different major events, right? But also share deal flow, conversation, and information. And so that connectivity for me was really, can we build a platform that's all about building community, right? And how can we service that community, with our technology that allows communities to really have a better way of connecting? And so it was just kind of like, I think Big for me is really just that connectivity between the culture, the people that don't know each other, the people that are like-minded, and it's, aligning people based on their interests, right? Based on their subject matter, and allowing the right people to be in the right clubs.
It requires a keen judgment of people. I'm sure your radar of who's to be trusted and who to deal with is pretty damn good. I know that from having spent time with you. But it also requires a little bit of experience and substantive knowledge about a whole hell of a lot of stuff. I mean, you produced successful documentaries,
Hmm.
you invested in the right kinds of companies. What is the appropriate mix as you choose to deal with people or investment opportunities between, trusting the entrepreneur and knowing a lot about the subject matter?
Well, I think now, now that I have big is really trusting our committee and our collective, right? And so our host or co-hosts, they're there as the masterminds. They're there, as that listening, learning, collective. And then when we start to really get together as a committee, as a lab, and look at deals. I know, Rick, you're such a great investor with, books and history on, finance and, understanding industries and, groundbreaking products and projects and investment tools. And so how can we take that next generation, right? And become like this passing of the torch, but also this shepherding and acknowledgement of the legends and our mentors that, we all want to be a part of, not only the process, but the party as well. And so I think that's kind of where I get super excited because every day of the week I get to meet with people who are super excited about building out their collective, whether it's big impact, women in leadership,
Mm.
sports intelligence, health is wealth. And so when I start looking at my life as Baron Davis, these are all of the staple pillars and the things that I'm interested in, right? I want to live a healthy life. I want to support women in, business and in sports. Sports, I want to learn, what ownership is like for a team, right? In entertainment, there are, content works the same way as it does in sports. So, what kind of storytelling or what does distribution look like? And then, you just start to think about all the little niche collectives of people that just share expertise every day. How can we transfer that to a greater audience of people who are looking to, find that funnel, right, and that filter to success?
Just a couple more. One is when I was pushing the Miami Heat franchise and a couple others back in the leather helmet days of the 1980s, and we got Ted Arison to pay what was then a record 32.5 million bucks for an NBA franchise, along with Minnesota and Charlotte and Orlando. And now we see the Buss family and Walter for 10 billion for the Lakers. You think you were born about 15, 20 years too early?
Yeah, man. I just, I always say when I was young, I just didn't know you, Rick. Had I known you,
It's not just
had
me,
I
man.
known you, I'd probably one still be playing because I would own the team, and they would have to make a rule for me being able to still play heading into, my mid 40s.
Yeah, you got to be able to play though. You got to be able to play. I know defense. Your
There
steals.
could have been one team for,
Yeah, yeah,
the 35 and under. We could have been
yeah,
called the,
the,
whatever,
the
the
whatever. You'd be called 2.5 steals a
United
game.
Legends.
You got to do 2.5 steals a game, or you're cut. That's the
Yeah.
deal. Final question for me for you is: where is Baron Davis 5 years from now?
I would say Baron Davis 5 years from now. I'm probably coaching my kids in high school. Um, you know, obviously doing the work that needs to be done. And I think, never stop helping the next generation, never stop investing in the next generation of athletes and entrepreneurs, never stop matchmaking. And so, I would say 5 years from now, Rick will be headed to our fifth Super Bowl together, our
Yeah.
fifth All Star weekend, and our calendars will be in sync. So as long as I'm with you, I know 5 years from now, everything will be, utterly successful. But I think that, that family office structure where we get to take care of, the athletes and the entertainers and the entrepreneurs that we know are going to over index, right? And then the
Yeah.
ones that are going to under index, helping them find the space where they will over index. That's kind of where I would like to be in 5 years.
God bless you. Your mouth to God's ears. I'll be
Thank you.
right there with you. Baron Davis, a credit to the entrepreneurialism and a post career transition, bar none. Sports Fest Rick Horrow, $1.3 trillion business of sports, even more. Speak with you soon. You're on the record and a tremendous time of year. The Winter Classic in Tampa, then off to Super Bowl 60, then off to Pebble Beach for AT&T. Now at the Bonaventure Hotel, the headquarters for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, for the NBA All-Star Game. And it's bigger than ever, a trilogy plus one of major events and economic impact. So let's look at the opening drive, and then we'll talk about the five to watch. First, opening drive, yes, Seahawks, thank God, Super Bowl 60. The Patriots fifth in value, nearly $9 billion. Seahawks 7 at $638 million annual revenue, $7 billion, but ranked 19th. By the way, yeah, you can be more than your opponent on the field, but it doesn't make really any difference. Seahawks with the strongest performance, well over 130 million people, because they've counted differently, and more people are doing it. Seahawks may be up for sale, grabbing somewhere between the pro rata share of the New York franchise, the Giants, which was at a $10 billion little pro rata share, but also the $6 billion with the Commanders. Near the game's 137 million, clearly the halftime show big, and the NFL generating significant dollars. That's number one. Number two, what kind of dollars? 1.48 billion in social media value during the 2025 regular season, and 41% of that effectively from YouTube alone. YouTube Shorts valued at 3.6 million, 144,000 posts, 757 million total engagements, 21.7 billion views, 60 million versus the Seahawks Super Bowl 60 with the Pats. The Eagles up there as well. Bottom line is, you look at all the YouTube shorts and all of the social media value, you come up with a dollar figure that you didn't even think about 5 years ago. That's number two. Number three, Milan Cortina, speaking of significant dollars, the 21.4 million opening ceremony viewership, up 34% from Beijing and up even more from Pyongyang. And the bottom line is that the 27 million viewers were complemented by the other number from Peacock, where it's a bigger number than ever before. Lead in to the Super Bowl, lead in after the Super Bowl. The numbers will appear to be and probably generated bigger than ever, even with the 6 to 8 hour time difference with most of North America. That's number three. Number four, hey, North Dakota State, how about them? $17 million to join the Mountain West Conference, $12 million to join the league, $5 million payout to the NCAA to let them move up in class. Well, they probably deserve it. 10 of the last 15 titles are theirs in grade school. Now they elevate even higher. Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, San Diego State, Utah State, all up there. Let's see how they do with the big boys. And conference musical chairs gets interesting. Big Four, power conferences, no doubt. Maybe there's a little bit of competition. That's number four. Number five, the sports apparel market, bigger than life. $243 billion in 2025, projected to reach nearly $383 billion by 2032, a 6.7 compound annual growth rate over the forecast period. Why? Athlete adoption, rising fitness awareness, innovation, technical advances, Nike's Project Amplify, Decathlon Sports India, and Lululemon's deal with the NFL all conspire to make those numbers even bigger than before. That's your opening drive. Let's see the five to watch. Well, speaking of LA, you've got the LA 28 Olympics, and they're a bit of a national flavor. 16 women and 12 men's teams to qualify for the World Cup. The Olympics as well, using the new to-be-completed Metro New York $780 million Queens Stadium. There will be preliminary matches on women's soccer and men's soccer side, New York City, Nashville, St. Louis, San Diego, and San Jose. And also, it's not just for soccer. As you may remember, Los Angeles has a partner. Oklahoma City canoe, kayak, and softball will be held exclusively in those venues. Yeah, Oklahoma City is pretty close to LA on a very large map. Point is, the economics took over, and it doesn't require the LA Olympic Committee to build new softball or new canoe kayak venues. Oklahoma City has them, and that's big. That's number one. Number two, Broncos. What a great season. But they also generate some significant interest in new ticket pricing. Yeah, their new stadium, probably 2031 or a little earlier. The secondary market tickets sold for over 50% above the 2025 season ticket rate. You know what that means then? They're raising ticket prices that will go to the Broncos directly, and 107,000 person waiting list. So what they call clear market indicators, plus a 14-3 record, it conspires to generate higher ticket prices. Probably worth it in the Mile High City. That's number two. Number three, Wyandotte County in Kansas votes 7-3 to approve the bonds for the $4 billion new stadium complex. Remember, the state funding nearly $3 billion of it, and the county will chip in, emphasizing design input and focused on a model created years ago by what are called star bonds to finance racetrack in Kansas versus Kansas City. It's exactly the same kind of process. Kudos to the Chiefs. That's number four. Number three. Number four, Milan Cortina ramps up AI across Olympic broadcasts, 6,500 hours of content feeding systems that concern 360-degree replays in 20 seconds, while distributed 428 live feeds. What a tremendous visual we're seeing, a lot of it AI. People don't want to admit how prolific it is, but it is pretty prolific. And then finally, with a basketball theme, the WNBA creeping ever so close to maybe get something solved before their magical May 8th deadline. The league moves a salary cap offer to $5.65 million and re-engaged on the team providing housing in a limited way, studio apartments for developmental players. There are certain one-bedroom apartments versus two. At least there's a little bit of moving. An average of $465,000 for recognition of minimum salaries, plus a retiree recognition program. Moving the cap, a 15% increase, etc., is not enough, but it's ever so slightly toward the goal of getting this all done. And hey, ready for the NBA weekend for the All-Star game. So let's buckle up and hope that gets resolved. Thank you very much for the opening drive and the 5 to watch here at the Bonaventure Hotel, ready for Intuit Dome NBA All-Star Weekend. We'd like to thank Callie Gazire for putting this together. We'd like to thank Baron Davis for lending his expertise. I'd like to thank you all for watching and listening, and join us next time when we continue to be on the record. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.